Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back again with you guys for another episode of our Raw Reaction series. Join you this morning at 8 a.m. UK time. We haven't had an Arsenal news show in a few days. Apologies for the lack of live shows. This is, I can confirm, live, and I can see all of you in the chat box. Thank you for waking up early on a Sunday after a disappointing result yesterday. I can assure you that I'm sure plenty of our listeners are probably still in bed, so maybe catching up on this one a little bit later. I'm thankful for all of you that have both tuned in live and are catching up on today's show. Yesterday was difficult. Yesterday was frustrating, and Arsenal lost their first away game in the league this season, of course, with a 1-0 defeat to Everton. I was there. I had the long drive up, the long drive back. It was an afternoon to forget. But we're not going to forget it just yet because there are some things to learn from. There are some things we need to discuss and plenty more as well. But good morning to those of you joining us live in the chat box today. Good morning to Ollie, to Paul, to Jose, Rich. Good morning to Wilson. Good morning to Penny Ween, Blackshine, Steve. Good morning to Yomi. Good morning to Sweating Merlot. Good morning to Matt and Stevie, Matt G, James, Josh, Red Star, Crusader, and plenty more of you guys down I see too. Good morning, everybody joining us in the chat box. And Napa Fire, I agree with you. I feel deflated. And that's natural. We've lost a game. We've not had to feel this way for a lot of this season. We've not had to feel the way that we feel right now. And that in itself is something that we should be certainly happy in itself about. And that is probably the bright side of how we feel right now, is that this isn't a familiar feeling this season. But yesterday was very, very disappointing indeed. Second away game we've lost this season after Man United, of course. Thank you for pointing that out. But yes, it was... First one, I think, first away game we've been in this season without scoring is what I meant to say. Because, of course, we scored in the game against Southampton and Manchester United earlier this year. So, yeah, first away game we haven't scored in this season. That's the stat I was looking for in my mind. But just like the efficiency of my brain this morning, Arsenal really weren't on their game either. We're going to talk through all of that and more. We're going to get your questions and your thoughts and feelings in part two, as always. So yes, an unfamiliar feeling, as I say. Arsenal's 1-0 defeat to Everton was a game in which we just didn't click. Like, so much was missing from what we've usually come to expect from Arsenal this season. There was just so much not there. And I just didn't feel like I was watching the Arsenal of this season. I felt like I was watching the Arsenal of not even last season, the season before last. So that's how I felt about this team. Just wasn't there. The same fluidity, the same motion, the same confidence. And I feel like Everton rocked us. I feel like the occasion, the narrative all around Everton really suited them in the game. And I see exactly like the mentality changed immediately. As soon as that Everton team stepped out onto the pitch, you could see what the game plan was. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. In particular, Sean Dyche's first game, of course, in charge of Everton. And it was so key to notice how he set the team up. 3 athletic midfielders in the middle in Onana, Doucouré, and Idrissa Gueye enabled them to really control the midfield, crowd it out, win every second ball, and it really kind of forced us down the wide areas. And it creates a bit of a blueprint, I think, for other teams that we're going to face this season, is that when we go away to teams that are battling relegation, we are going to come up against this type of style of play. And it is going to have to be something that Mikel Arteta needs to work out how to work and how to beat it. We can moan all we like about they played a certain way, but if you want to be champions, you need to work out how to beat these sides. And we didn't have an answer for it yesterday. I actually spoke to James Tarkowski after the game in the mix zone. I didn't speak to any of the Arsenal players because, of course, we didn't win. So it doesn't tend to be that they're open to speaking. But I spoke to James Tarkowski after the game and asked him if there was kind of any specific tactical way in which they found under Dyche to win. Because, of course, Tarkowski previously playing with Dyche at Burnley, we've seen them get results against Arsenal in similar fashion. But he didn't really want to divulge, as you would imagine, too much about those details, and said that, to be honest, he's been very impressed by Arsenal this season, and that actually specifically the way in which they played was just something to laud and be happy about from their perspective. From our perspective, it was the real kryptonite to us in this campaign. Moving into more of the Arsenal side of things, Odegaard was really off it, I thought, yesterday. Just didn't quite bring the same directness and edge that we've seen in his game. He lacked a little bit of refinement that we've usually seen. And it goes to show how important he is to the team, because if he's not on it, we are significantly off it. And we need Odegaard to be so integral to the way that we play. And it does go to show that if you can kind of shut down Odegaard, if you can get into him, if you can stop him from playing and doing his magic, it really does frustrate Arsenal and stops them from creating more than they typically would. And he was crowded out, and that midfield in particular, because Partey wasn't particularly. I'll talk about him shortly, but yeah, I think that Odegaard really suffered from being crowded out of the game, which is a real shame. I thought that the Gabriel Magalhaes was really good. Now, obviously, Everton kind of set up in the way in which they played these long balls over the top, trying to get the knockdowns, win the second balls. And actually, Gabriel, I thought, stood out as one of the players and one of the positives from the game. And to be honest, he is a player that has come on leaps and bounds this season. And really is a player that I think in these matches where we have to be a little bit more physical, that he's going to be he's going to have to be a player that steps up continuously and kind of leads from the back. And so in terms of a day of disappointment, he was one of the real positives I thought that stood out, and I was very happy with his performance. And I kept on going, I kept on praising him in the live blog that I was running during the game, and yeah, it was certainly a positive amongst plenty of things that we're going to be critical of today. Mikel Arteta's in-game management needs to be better for me. The substitutions really frustrated me, actually, because they were all like-for-like changes. We saw Partey come off and Jorginho come on. We saw Odegaard come off and Vieira come on. We saw Martinelli come off and Trossard come on. We saw White come off and Tomiyasu come on. They were all like for likes. And we need more variation. I would have liked to have seen Xhaka come off of Vieira, to give a little bit more something, creativity, pace, direction. I would have liked to have seen maybe us go with two up top. At the point, I know that at the point it was 0-0, we brought off Martinelli, but maybe we could have kept Martinelli on a little bit longer, and then brought Trossard on for an Odegaard, or brought Trossard on for a Xhaka, or, just try and add something else. And that lack of another forward off the bench, obviously, is something that is a bit of a problem. And there is also a Mario Kojo-Dubry on the bench, because Nelson's not deemed fully fit yet, and Smith Rowe in either. But when you're in that situation and you've got Tomiyasu coming off the bench, there's part of me that goes, look, we're 1-0 down here. Is Tomiyasu really going to change the game more than a kid that's fully motivated to come off the bench and try and do something in the last few minutes of the game? I would have chucked on Kojo-Dubry in those last few minutes to create a bit of chaos. He's an unknown quantity. You don't really know what you're going to get from him. He would have created a little bit of chaos at the last 5 to 10 minutes. So, yeah, Arteta's in-game management, again, I think will come under question here in the moments in which we're trying to come back into games. And look, we've done that this season. We were losing to West Ham and we came back and we won. We were losing to Manchester United. We came back, we won. So it's not like he's not been able to do it this season. It's not like this is a reoccurring problem. But in yesterday's game, if there was something to be critical of Arteta, it wasn't the starting lineup. That was fine. But the way in which I think he managed to try and change the game, it was too safe. And I think we needed to be a little bit more, we need to take a few more risks with the substitutions. Now, of course, when Jesus and Smith Rowe and Nelson are there as well on the bench, maybe we'll have more options in attack. But yeah, I thought the substitutions could have been a bit more offensive-minded rather than the like-for-likes that he went for. Partey did not look like he was ready and fit in this game. I fear that they may have rushed him back into this one. And yes, he's been suffering with this rib problem. It wasn't deemed serious. But if he wasn't ready, maybe Jorginho should have been in from the start. I saw some tweets really battering Jorginho in this game. Really battering the guy. And I thought that was unfair, because I thought that completely ignored the context of him entering the game. It really did kind of. I think I saw Connor Hunn on Twitter a tweet saying he had a disaster. I found that kind of strange. I didn't think he was. I don't agree with Sephiroth in the chat saying he was very poor. Sorry. I thought Jorginho was fine. I thought his progressive passing was good. That was quick little bits of interplay in the middle of the park, playing it out wide. He was the only one coming short for blooming throw-ins. When the most touches he must have had was when we went short from those throw-ins. It was an awful situation for him to come into. You then come on, and then minutes later, there's a corner and we concede. And then you're in a situation. But Partey, I thought, was off it in the first half. Didn't give us the same directness that he usually gives us. The same fluidity and elegance that he can bring with the way he brings the ball forwards in midfield. But yeah, I needed something more from the middle, and we didn't necessarily get that. I wish we had something different at right back in these games. Ben White's been brilliant this season, and Tomiyasu in some of the games has been called to come in again, has done well. But mainly the focus on these two has been defensively. That's where they've really shone. Progressively, White has got better, and in the final third has certainly got better. But it's these types of games I wish I had more of an offensive right back that you could say, bring off a White or bring off a Tomiyasu and bring on someone that's going to overlap Saka with pace, get him behind, get those balls into the box. This is where I miss having that kind of option. And it's where maybe, and I know that we're going to laugh at this, but when you've got someone like Cedric who is that style that you can bring off the bench, you can be more offensive, maybe you do miss that. Now, I don't want it to be Cedric. I want it to be someone who is better than him. But I do think that we lack that offensive right back option. Maybe it's when Nelson comes back that you can be a little bit braver with the substitutes. And if we're losing, say, 1-0, you can take off, and you've got 10 minutes to go, you can take off White or you can take off Tomiyasu and you bring Nelson on to be kind of an additional wing back. It's risky, but I think we need something to support offensively the wingers when they're running out of ideas, because Martinelli and Saka kind of both, they need more variation. And that brings me on to the next point about Martinelli, who does need more variation in his game. He needs to have that ability to have a final ball with his left foot. His left foot certainly needs work, and that's where Trossard, I think, is a bit better than him on his weaker foot. And typically Martinelli can be crowded out. He's going to cut inside, and that's maybe why his form's dipped a bit, because teams know what to do against Martinelli sometimes. He scored a couple of goals with his left foot this season, but it's when he does that run to the touchline, I think he takes that extra touch when he could just take the touch a little bit less and cross the ball before he takes that final touch to the touchline. He's just lacking that confidence with his left foot. He needs more variation in his game. And I think that he was a little bit too predictable. But where maybe, as Mike says in the chat box, when Jesus comes back, maybe we'll see that again step up in form from Martinelli. And the last point I want to make is that Trossard, when he came off the bench, he created a couple of chances, he had a couple of shots on goal. I think that Trossard is great when he's on the ball, but he needs to do more when he's off it. He needs to try and get himself in the game more. He needs to show himself more. He needs to call for the ball more. Sometimes he waits a bit too much for me. He's a little bit too expectant of his teammates. He needs to be a little bit more proactive, I think, in trying to get the ball to him. Martinelli really calls for it. Martinelli gets into the positions where he's going to need it. And I think that Trossard is a player that needs to do more when he's not in possession, because he can't wait. You can't be a player waiting in this Arsenal team. When you're in the game, or when you're not in the game, you need to do more yourself to get yourself in it. You can't rely on your teammates to give you that service. So for me, Trossard in possession on the ball, a real threat. When not on the ball, he needs to do more to try and get himself and make himself available, more movement, that type of thing. So that's what I think we need to see more so from him. Now, Arsenal's position in the table didn't change, but you can change your position globally with the use of NordVPN, who can, of course, give you a fantastic service in keeping yourself safe and secure online. And, of course, by going to nordvpn.com/Gooner, you can get yourself a significant discount off the service. You can keep yourself locked away from those peeping Todd Bowleys. And, of course, the security and ability to use this on your phone, your tablet, your laptop, all the different devices gives you that safety and security that we all know that we need when we are surfing the net online. If you don't like the service, of course, you can get a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can say any fairer than that. But as I say, go to nordvpn.com/Gooner to get yourself a significant discount off a subscription. and get the safety, security, and ability to change your geolocation to your heart's content. Leandro Trossard, despite my criticisms, is still, I think, going to be a serious asset for the club moving forwards. And you can win a signed Leandro Trossard shirt by going to today's link in the description, Football Prizes. And there's plenty of opportunities to win some instant win prizes, including a signed and custom framed Patrick Vieira Arsenal photo montage. So far, 87 tickets have been sold, which means that less than 50 remain in the competition. It closes on Tuesday, so you just got 2 days left to get involved in the latest Football Prizes competition. Okay, let's go to part 2 and your questions and comments right after this. Okay, let's jump into the chats. Matt G, why didn't you punch Tarkowski in the arm for scoring against us? Matt, because I quite like to return to the mix zone and not have to worry about, losing any of my rep. I'll tell you what, when Neil Mopé, though, walked past me in the mix zone, I just remember just looking at him like, oh, man, I really don't like you. Well, he is one of those players that just winds you up so much. And at the end of the game, he played it perfectly. And to be honest, you have to be a bit critical of us. We bit, and it wasted time. And Zinchenko bit a bit. And yeah, he was ludicrous and ridiculous. Just get up, get on with it, move on. Just ignore the moron that he is, So, Neil Mopé. Thank you so much for helping support the channel, by the way, becoming a member. I really appreciate the kind support, as I do for Sweating Merlot, brilliantly named YouTube channel. Thank you so much for the kind support and welcome to the TGT community. Sir Nicholas says, honestly, I'm not too concerned about the match. We looked like a team that had played twice in the previous 18 days and weren't prepared for the date with a desperate side. Lessons to be learned. Now, Arsenal have got 2 games, of course, after this. We're at home against Brentford, and then we're home against some team. What are they called? Manchester City. So 2 big games, and we need to go into that game against Man City off the back of a win. We need to rescue our form, so we're not looking for a response against City. We need to go into that game with momentum. And the fact that we got 2 home games is obviously good. We played a lot of away games this season. This was the first game we failed to score in an away game all season. And, we need to make sure that we build up a little bit of momentum. Brentford looked good against Southampton, it has to be said. They won comfortably 3-0. But we also looked good in their ground earlier this season when we won 3-0 and had all the momentum with us. So hopefully we see a response on Saturday. We just got to wait less than a week now until we play our next game. Hopefully, keeping those fingers crossed, we can get the result that we need. Jason says, do you think this was Arsenal's worst game of the season? Yeah, without a doubt. I don't think there's too much debate about that. I know the PSV game was pretty bad as well. The Brighton game was not great either. But this game by far is the worst. And, the thing, I tweeted this yesterday. Every season has a worst performance. Every season there is going to be one that is the worst. Let's hope that that's the worst that it gets. Let's hope that we never have to experience a day as bad as yesterday. And, maybe it's a bit of a kick up the backside that we needed when we go into those games against Brentford and City. We lost at City in the FA Cup the week prior. We come off the back of 2 defeats now. And last season, we had a bit of a habit of losing games in a bit of a run of 2 or 3 or 4 games. We need to stop that run already. We can't afford to lose 3 games in a row or drop points in 3 games. We need to be strong. We need to be clinical against Brentford. We need to smash them, to be honest. We need to have a really, really good game so that we can go into the match against Manchester City with a serious, serious win under our belt, because it's obviously only going to be 4 days later. It's a midweek game in the evening. So we need to make sure that we give it our all in that fixture and try to win it. Of course, City play today against Spurs. That game's going to be really important as well. So let's see what happens. Pinnyween says, we lost to City, but it was a happy loss of sorts. It was yesterday more than a performance or the competition that was most annoying. I think yesterday's was more the performance of us and obviously the performance of Everton. Everton were great. You can't not give Everton credit for what they did. And you can't not give Sean Dyche credit for the way in which they played. They played a perfect game. They looked dangerous on the counter. We could have arguably lost by more. Decore and Calvert-Lewin had 2 fantastic headed opportunities that they missed. Ramsdale's another player I should point out for some praise as well. I thought he did well in certain moments. But when your centre-back and your goalkeeper are the 2 people that you're praising the most, Yeah. And I didn't mention Odegaard missed that absolute sit. Needs to get at least on target. Nketiah did really well on that left-hand side to create that opportunity for Odegaard. Should have done a lot better, indeed. Peter says, Tom, do you think that we need to try more controlled long shots against a well-marshalled low block to try and pull defences out? Well, I don't necessarily think so. We did take a few. Partey took one in the first half. Zinchenko had a couple in the second half. We are taking some long shots, but yeah, I don't know. Hard Pixel TV says, why were our fans turning on Jorginho? He wasn't the problem. We can't stop scapegoating players, it seems. We need to grow up big time as a fan base, and our team is growing, and so should we. The hate for Jorginho yesterday, I actually feel, and I'm very critical of, in particular, some big accounts that really took the time yesterday to batter Jorginho. And I always feel as though, there it is when you have a lot of followers on social media, and I'm certainly at the lower end of the bigger accounts on social media. There are plenty of accounts with far more followers than me. And I'm not saying that you can't have an opinion just because you have more followers than somebody else. But I think sometimes when you come out with reactionary statements saying Jorginho was terrible, Jorginho had a disaster, Jorginho was this, that, you have an influence. And I think you have to take that into account. You have to be a bit more responsible. Because let's be real, he didn't have a disaster at all. It wasn't a disaster of a performance whatsoever. He weren't great. And to be honest, neither was many people. But to single out Jorginho in his first performance and ignore the entire context of the game in which he'd entered at that stage, I think is just so unfair, and then puts him off on kind of an immediate back foot that he now has to try and come back from. When in reality, the way in which we should have looked at it was Partey wasn't great in the first half. Jorginho's come on. We've conceded within seconds from a completely different scenario, not to do with him. And his style of approach, when you're lacking, I think he really lacked the support of needing someone a little bit more attacking in those moments. We could have brought off Xhaka for Vieira instead of Odegaard, I think. And if he'd have had Vieira and Odegaard in front of him, maybe giving a bit more push to try and turn things around, we could have seen more. But he's a controller, in those moments. We took off Partey because he was poor, and we brought on Jorginho to try and, because Partey wasn't on it. But Jorginho is someone that's going to give you control. And in those moments, we need someone a little bit more progressive. And if you haven't got Partey doing that, I think you're going to lack it. So in the context of the game, I can't scapegoat Jorginho for being a guy. He's not the guy you bring on to try and win you a game. That's not his role. That's not what we've bought him for. We've bought him for those moments where Partey is either unavailable or you want to bring an extra midfielder on to try and control the game. But if you're 1-0 down, or if you're 0-0 and you're going in search of a win, he's not the type you look to. And so I'm not going to judge him for not being able to change the game, because that's not what we bought him for. I'm not going to, if we bring on Vieira and we bring on Trossard, players that are more offensive and that we bring on to be proactive and try and go and search for a goal, that's who I'm going to be more critical of if we fail to do so. If we bring on Jorginho in a game that we are winning, and he makes a mistake, or he's not on it, or he's not good enough in controlling the game and we concede or we lose it, that's when I'll bring the focus onto Jorginho. That's when contextually I'm going to start looking at him, in the moments of criticism. But I just think it lacks thinking to just start battering Jorginho out of nowhere for this game in particular. Arteta for me is the one that I look to most in this game for the reason why we weren't able to get back into it, because the substitutions weren't good enough. The substitutions needed to be better. Going like for like when you're 1-0 down, it's not good enough. We need to see more proactiveness with his changes. We need to see more risk, more bravery with his changes from the bench. That's what we need. And he lacked that, which is a shame, because there's games in the past where Arteta has been a lot more different. You think about the games where Arteta's gone to a back three, we've brought in an offensive player and we've managed to get something out of those games. I just don't know why he didn't do that this time. Because whilst Everton were, sure, threatening on the break, they were locking up shop. They were bringing on more defensive-minded players in the game. And I think that we could have gone for it a bit more, especially when we were 1-0 down and you bring off White for Tomiyasu. And I just can't quite get my head around why we went like for like in all of the changes. Aditya says, you mentioned about Arteta's management, something I strongly agree with. I felt the substitutions came too early. Even when we had 30 minutes to go and we were 2-1 up, What should we have changed? It's ironic because sometimes we say Arteta's too late with the changes, and now we're saying maybe the substitution came a bit too early. It's easy to say that when we conceded just a few moments later, but I felt we could have waited a bit with Martinelli on. I know that Martinelli wasn't had the best of games, but I just think that when it comes to Trossard, he's the type that you can bring on to bring in addition to somebody. You don't have to bring him on instead of someone else. We could have taken off a Xhaka or taken off an Odegaard and been a bit more offensive with that, because Odegaard was lacking directness. So if you bring Trossard off and play him behind the striker, you get a little bit more direct. Then if we get a goal and go 1-0 up, you can take off Nketiah, or you can take off Martinelli and bring on Jorginho to get you an extra midfielder, or bring on Vieira to give you a little bit less of a direct option in a number 8 position. Do you know what I mean? I feel like there's something there that we could have done differently. Let's go to, Justin says we made the changes at 0-0 and we conceded 30 seconds after they came on. And this is the thing, like maybe if we'd have left them on a bit longer, or been a bit more direct with the changes, maybe things would have been different, but we don't know. We don't know. It's impossible to know. It's just purely putting out different suggestions for what we could have done. And it's very easy in hindsight for me to say this, and I admit that, very happily. It's very, very easy to admit that with the benefit of hindsight, but that's what we do. We talk about things in hindsight because it's easy for us and it's not easy for them. If he says, are you concerned about the 2 goals we've conceded from corners this year against Man United and now Everton? It's something that obviously we can be better at, maybe. But last season, I think we conceded 1 goal from a set piece, did we not? 1 or 2 goals all season, and I think they came in the last 5 games or something like that. So I'm not necessarily concerned. We are going to concede corners. It is going to happen. You can't lock them out completely. You can do as much as you can to try and do that. But yeah. Matt says, why didn't we bring Kieran Tierney on? Again, another decent option. We could have brought Xhaka off, moved Zinchenko into that midfield role and put Tierney on at left centre-back. I think left back, sorry. You could have done a bit more direct, given someone on the left a bit more overlap. I'm not sure why Tierney didn't come on. It's a fair question. Shivan says, you criticised him when he was braver with his subs against United. Again, it's amazing when a comment comes in that, again, lacks complete context. So in the game against Man United, we made changes. I think Smith Rowe came on, and I think Fabio Vieira came on, and I think someone else came on all at once. And in that game, the difference between that game and what we were doing in this game is the game against Man United, we were actually in the ascendancy in that moment. We were, I think it was 2-1 at that point that we made those changes. We were actually in control of the game and we were creating chances and we were doing well. And we brought on a lot of players in that moment. In fact, let me go back to the game. Man United 3-1 Arsenal. Because I'm sure we made at least 2. It might have even been 3 changes at the same time. Let me find it. So, we brought on Smith Rowe, Vieira and Nketiah, all in the 74th minute. Made massive change in one moment at 2-1 when you're in control of the game, even though we were losing, but we were in control of the game instead of making chances, and it did make us more open. I'm not suggesting we make more 3 changes at once. I'm suggesting you make 1 change here, say bringing off Odegaard for Trossard, or leaving on Martinelli a bit longer, or bringing off in the final 10 minutes White for more of an attacking option, a Koja Dubry maybe, and going for it a bit more. That's what I'm suggesting, So it's easy to throw in a comment saying, but you criticised this and now you're criticising this differently here. That's not the case, because you haven't included the context of why I criticised the time at Man United, because it was so different. Such a different scenario in the game state. So it doesn't fit, I'm afraid. Hard Pixel says, I think we should have brought Tomiyasu on earlier. White looked a bit off, no pun intended. And Tommy would have done better to deal with the aerial threat. Tommy is quite good in the air, but the reason why we lost the game isn't because of aerial. It's not because we lacked aerial threat. The reason why we lost the game is because we didn't create enough. We weren't good enough at dealing with them defensively. They defended well, and we didn't have an answer for it. Yes, we lost in the case of we conceded a goal from a corner, and we could have defended it better. But we could have had the game away if we had also taken our chances. Eddie Nketiah had a great chance to put us 1-0 up in the first half. Needed to be more composed, go across the keeper instead of just smashing it as hard as he could in that moment. Lacked composure. If we'd have taken some of our chances, we arguably could have already been out of sight in this game, but we weren't, and we didn't take those chances. Keem says Martinelli is refusing to take people on these days. Do you think it's an absence of Jesus? I don't know. I don't think it necessarily is refusing to. I think he did take players on in the first half. He often just doesn't make the pass soon enough. He holds it on for that one touch extra or one pass later. Maybe sometimes wish he would be a little bit more. I wish he could do things a bit quicker, a bit earlier, and make his decision faster. So that's what I would say more so about Martinelli. Darius says, we've had off days like this before, but the difference is that we were the ones to score the scrappy goals and not concede. We've been due a defeat like this, and the response will tell us everything. You know, if you are going to have a kick up the backside, obviously we'd rather it was... I guess if you are going to kick up a backside, you'd rather it wasn't against City. You'd rather it wasn't against Spurs. You know, January was great. You know, a solid 0-0 draw against Newcastle that maybe we could have won. Great win against Spurs. Great win against Man United. And then February, we've started a bit off. Well, end of January, I suppose, with the FA Cup game as well. But we've started a bit off this month. And we need to make sure that we don't have a bad Feb. We need to make sure that we have a great Feb. And if we have a great Feb, it'll be because we've beaten Brentford and we've beaten Man City. And is there another game in February? Yeah, we've got 2 more games after that. We've got Villa away from home and Leicester away from home. So we end the month with 2 away games that are going to be tough. And we're going to have to try and win those games. And they're not going to be easy. Away games never are. And I look forward to them. And I look forward to hopefully seeing a reaction from this team. So that's ultimately what I want to see is I want to see a reaction from this side. That's something that we struggled to do last season. We would lose games, you know, in a row, and we weren't able to kind of address things quick enough. We need to do that more this season, and we have done. When we lost to Man United, we won. When we drew to Southampton, we won. When we drew to Newcastle, we won. So, you know, when we have had those games, we've responded. This time, we need to respond to it once again. Let's go to Matt Thornton says, what did the pitch look like, Tom? It was terrible. And actually, a lot of the journalists made a comment about the fact that the pitch was, it was dry. It held the ball up. It didn't allow Arsenal to move the ball quickly. A lot of the journalists in the press box were discussing about whether Dyche had said, don't water the pitch, make it as dry as possible. And, you know, it's not an excuse because when you have to win games away from home, we've been very good away from home this season. But yeah, it certainly didn't help. It didn't help the game at all. But it's not an excuse. You can't point to that. But it wasn't great. You know, it certainly suited the home team more. And as we know, that's certainly what ended up happening. Omar says the last 2 away games Tom has gone to, we both lost. Can you stop travelling to the away games so we start winning? I would like to point out that I've been to plenty of away games this season that we've also won. Just to put that into context. I mean, let's go back through the season. Yes, I did go to Man United away, but I went to Brighton away and we won. I went to earlier on this season. Where else did we go? We went to Southampton away. Oh, we drew that one. I went to Leeds away. We won that game. I couldn't go to Brentford because I was on my honeymoon. Where else have I been this season? Shut up. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. I should be at the Villa and Leicester games, but I'm sure it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Don't worry. I swear it is not a problem. It's not a problem. We will address this quickly. But I tell you what, the players were down, you know, in the mix zone. Obviously, didn't get to speak to any of the Arsenal guys, but it's really tight and compact in that mix zone. And obviously, a lot of the Arsenal players are waiting around and they were dejected. A lot of them with their hoods up, looking at their phones, in their own thoughts. It did make me think whether they were looking at comments. You know, we talk a lot about whether the players see comments and criticisms after games. And, you know, a lot of them were waiting for Arteta to finish up his media and for everything to be packed up so they can leave. And they were on their phones. And, you know, I have no idea what they were doing. But it does make me think whether or not they start looking through social media, looking at the reaction. And I think we know that they see stuff. And I think the reaction after the game was hyperbolic, and we know that it's going to be. It's Arsenal fan base, as you know, overall can be a horrible, horrible place at times. It's not everybody. And it's always important to point out that it's always some fans and not all fans. But yeah, there was a big reaction yesterday, and you could tell the players were really, really frustrated by that. So yeah, and they looked frustrated after the game. That's for sure. They know they're upset. Zinchenko was gutted, really was angry, and was storming around behind the scenes after the game. You know, so yeah, they're not happy. And I don't want them to be happy. I want them to be angry. I want them to be upset. I want them to be able to come back and against Brentford absolutely respond. And that's what we want. That's what we need to see. Shivam says, I love Sean Dyche, man. He gave us the nastiest mid-block we've ever played against. You beautiful bald man. Awesome. Awesome coach. I think that it's something that we're going to have to learn from. You know, if anything, it's a test. It's a test that we didn't pass this time, but it's certainly outlined a blueprint that other teams are going to look to, and that we are going to have to analyze. And you can be sure that they will analyze it, and they're going to have to look into why we lost this game, and we need to find out why we lost this game. Anyway, I'm going to wrap things up there. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. It means a lot, as always. Sorry that I can't bring you more positive news. I'll be back tomorrow morning with the usual 8 a.m. show. We'll, of course, be looking at the Arsenal news from the last 24 hours, further reaction, further fallout, further breakdowns as we look ahead to a big game against Brentford. Any further rumours in the transfer world will, of course, bring you up to date with as well. And yes, it sucks. It's horrible. I hate it. I'm now going to go have a day of golf and try and take my mind off of Arsenal. But yeah, it sucks. I hate this feeling. I hate losing. I hate having to drive 8 to 10 hours and not come out with a victory. But it is part of football. You can't win them all. And I've said to you a number of times this season that we are going to lose games. It's going to happen. At some point this season, we were going to lose. At some point this season, we were going to have our worst game. I'm hopeful that this is our worst game and that everything else from here on in will be better. And I'm hoping that I speak to you after the Brentford game with a win under our belt, a response from this fixture, and the perfect setup for the game against Man City, for the biggest game of our season, because it is the biggest game of our season on Wednesday night, not this week, coming next week, the following week, when we face City at the Emirates, because we can beat them. I said that after we lost them in the FA Cup, we can beat that team. They're not going to do an Everton. That's not how they're going to play. They're going to be a very different side, a lot more quality, sure, but we can beat them. And that's what we need to do. So stay positive. Take your minds off the football. Let's hope City drop points. I don't care who they're playing. I'm not going to say anything about the team they're playing. Let's hope they drop points today. You know, I don't care for this BS of, oh, I can never support that lot. I'm not saying anything about that lot. I just want City to drop points. That's all I want. You know, you can't rely on that lot to do anything, so don't expect it. I'm not going to watch the game. I'll tell you that. I'm going to have a day off of football today. I'm just going to ignore everything as much as I can. I'm going to check the scores later after I finish my round of golf. And yeah, that's all I'm going to do. That's all I'm going to do. We back the players. We support the club. We hope that they respond. We don't batter them. We don't jump onto social media and say people have had a disaster and try and batter them after the first second. You know, we can be critical and we can praise and we can be grounded and we can be objective. But I ain't losing my head top of the table. Thank you for listening. I will speak to you tomorrow morning. Have a fantastic Sunday. As I say, take your mind off things, relax, sit back, enjoy what you can. And I will see you then. Have a great day. Drop a like on the video. Subscribe if you're new. And as always, up the Arsenal.